All right. Good morning. It's always so delightful for me to be here because I feel like I'm in dog heaven. I mean, the people are great too, but I love it when there's dogs involved. All right. So there's a story about a priest who was traveling. He was making a trip to the Vatican. And when he got there, he was getting closer to the Vatican. He's in Rome. And he sees this pedestal. And on top of the pedestal is a golden phone, a telephone. And under that phone is a big sign that says, phone calls to God, $1,000. He's a little curious about that. He walks on a little farther and he sees another pedestal with the same thing. And as he gets into the Vatican property, several places he sees a pedestal with a golden phone and the same sign, phone calls to God, $1,000. Well, about a week later, he's traveling now to Jerusalem and he's going to visit the Wailing Wall. And as he gets close to the Wailing Wall, wouldn't you know, he sees a pedestal with a golden phone on top. And the sign says, phone calls to God, 25 cents. And he thinks 25 cents. So he finds a rabbi and says, well, you know, up at the Vatican, it's $1,000 for this phone call. How come it's only 25 cents here? And the rabbi says, well, it's a local call here. Oh, are there any former Catholics here? Uh-oh. So that really has nothing to do with my talk, except it had the word pedestal in it. And what is a pedestal anyway? A pedestal is something high that we put either people or things up on top of so that we can look up to them, revere them or whatever. But, you know, we put a lot of people on pedestals. Have you ever put someone on a pedestal and then eventually watch them kind of fall off the pedestal? I know I have. And I think some of the people that we tend to maybe put on pedestals might be, for instance, let's think of movie stars. Now, when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies was The 10 Commandments. Remember that? And who played Moses? Charlton Heston. Now, I thought he was absolutely a clone of Moses. But then years later, I was reading that he was involved in gun control. And this is not a political statement. I'm not for or against. You know, we have a right to have the protection of guns. But somehow when I saw that he was involved in all of that, and it's like, I thought he was Moses. Gee. We might also think of athletes. How about like O.J. Simpson or Tiger Woods or any of those? You know, for a long time, people were putting them up on a pedestal like they could do no wrong, but they're human beings. And we have to understand they're human beings, you know, but there's no reason to put them up above us. We might think of politicians, but that kind of speaks for itself today, doesn't it? But really, I think when people decide to become a politician, I believe that most of them do have in their heart that they do want to serve us and they want to do a good job and they want to do it honestly. I think once they get into office, it's a little maybe impossible to really stay on that high standard. And so we've seen many of them fall to different scandals and all kinds of things that no one should be doing, much less a politician who represents us. We might think of clergy or televangelists even. Maybe all the priests that were involved in pedophilia, maybe people like Jim Jones. All of these people I know were put on a pedestal by those who followed them. And yet, did they deserve to be there? Does anyone deserve to be there? Not really, because there's no one up there above us. We might even think of some of the New Age teachers. Now, I remember when my kids were I guess adolescent, early teens, I used to bring home Wayne Dyer tapes to listen to while we were eating dinner, because I do respect Wayne Dyer a lot. Now, when my son, who's now in his 50s, when he got older, probably in his 30s or something, and he was in an airport one time, and he was in line going up to the desk, you know, to check in. And lo and behold, a couple people in front of him in line was Wayne Dyer. And the flight was canceled. And Wayne was getting a little testy up there. I mean, he wasn't arguing, he wasn't beating anyone up, but he was a little annoyed that the flight was canceled because he had to get to Chicago or wherever it was for a talk. He would have thousands of people waiting for him to get there. So he had to get there. So he was adamant that that person at the desk has to find him another flight. Well, my son was so disillusioned because he thought that Wayne Dyer would be someone that would never get upset about anything. But that's not true, right? So Wayne Dyer at that time fell off the pedestal that my son had put him on. Not that he ever really put him on there, but I like to pretend that he did. And maybe even our parents, when we're little kids, we think our parents are like God, or our teachers in school. We think they know everything, right? And we might have them on a pedestal. But eventually, as we are growing older, we might decide that they're not really doing everything in the perfect way. And many people have parents that they would never put them on a pedestal. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have those parents that really are ones that we look up to. But I was really blessed to have those kind of parents, and maybe you were too. So how many here feel like someone has ever put you on a pedestal? Anybody? Couple people, yeah. And how does it make you feel? Uncomfortable. Like you have to live up to someone else's expectations 24/7, right? And if you let your hair down, I know you can't let your hair down, Bill, but for those that could let our hair down, it's like we don't want to do it because we might disappoint them and show them our own humanness. And it might feed our ego for a while, but it's really not a comfortable situation. It's really not fair to that person that's being put on the pedestal either. So some of the people we might put on a pedestal might be romantic relationships. When we first meet that one and only, and we want to show them the best of us, we want to put our best foot forward. We don't want them to see all of those stupid little things that we do when no one's looking. We don't want to have them experience our idiosyncrasies, and it goes both ways. So we're both looking at each other through these rose-colored glasses and not really seeing, well, we see the best, but we're not really seeing the less than the best of each other. And so it's great to admire each other. Admiration is wonderful because that means we're seeing the good in each other. We're seeing the good that they do and the good that they are. But it's really unrealistic when we put them up here and then we have to see how they are in their day-to-day, 24-hour-a-day activities. But we can honor their uniqueness rather than something that they aren't. Others that we might put on a pedestal would be spiritual teachers or gurus. A lot of them have followers. A lot of them have groupies. Have you ever been a groupie to somebody? I mean, a lot of people really follow. I know years ago, Ram Dass was one that many people were talking about. Remember Ram Dass? Is he still living? I can't. Okay, recently died, I think. Well, I never hung on his every word because it was usually 5 minutes between the first word and the second word. And I usually fell asleep before he got to that second word. But I acknowledge him as a wonderful teacher for many people. There are others that may be in that category. Maybe for nowadays, it might be Eckhart Tolle or, hey, Neil Donald Walsh, or any of the teachers that are inspiring people. For Christians, it might be Billy Graham or Joel Osteen. Those are wonderful teachers for the people that resonate with the messages. For some, it might be Sai Baba or Paramahansa Yogananda. There are many, many teachers out there. They're all teaching something different, or maybe something the same, but in a different way. And they all are appropriate for some people. But when we put them on a pedestal and believe every single word that they can do no wrong, that can really be disillusioning when we find out that they actually might pick their nose or something just really human. And maybe even our family, like I said, I had wonderful parents, but as I was growing up, I had different belief system than the religious belief system that I grew up with. And I kind of think of myself as the black sheep of the family because I didn't stay with the religion of my upbringing. Maybe some of you feel that way. I let go of my idea of religions that follow the 4 Ds. You know what the 4 Ds are? The do's and don'ts, the dogmas and doctrines. Do's and don'ts, dogmas and doctrines. Most traditional religions have them, but it's estimated that there are over 4,500 individual religions on the planet. And I can guarantee you every one of them has their own set of 4 Ds. Now, how confusing is that? So I let go of all that. I love places like this where we can just be spiritual, but not be attached to specific teachings that tell us what we may and may not do, can and cannot do, all of that. So I think a lot of times we think of teachers as being false prophets. And really, there are no false prophets because they're all true prophets for somebody that resonates with their message. There was a documentary, I didn't see it, but maybe some of you saw it. I don't know when it came out, a few years ago. I think it's pronounced Kamari, K-A-M. Yeah, did you see that? Okay, did anyone not see it like me? Good. In that case, I'll tell you what it was about. I hate it when I get up here and everything I'm saying, you all know anyway, but then you know everything, don't you? Anyway, I believe it was a documentary about a man who decided to portray himself as an Indian guru, an Indian teacher. And he let his hair grow, maybe not as much as your sweet puppy dog, but he let his hair grow long. He had a beard, and he wore the garb that an Indian guru might wear. He spoke with the Indian accent. I think he was Indian descent, right? Yeah. And so he pretended that he was this guru teacher. People started to follow him. And so he started to teach something, and people would follow him and just hang on every word. He had groupies, he had big events, and people were truly expanding and growing. And that was valid. At some point, apparently, he told all of his followers that he was going to be going to India for a couple of months or a few months. And so he did. And when he returned, all of his followers were, of course, excited to see him again. He had a big event where he's up on a stage. Only this time he had shaven his beard. He had cut his hair short. He was wearing Western clothes. I suppose he might have still had his Indian accent. I don't know. But he got up on the stage just like a regular dude. And his followers were really upset with that because they thought they were following a real, true Indian avatar. And here's this regular guy up there. And I guess he told them that it was an experiment. He wanted to see how he would be able to influence people if they thought that he was truly a guru when he really wasn't. Now, you might call him a false prophet. I know some of his followers got really angry. They cursed at him. They were just really feeling like victims. And yet others who had been following him, they kind of laughed about it. And they thought, that's fine, because they realized that what he was teaching them was not about him, that they had grown, they had expanded, whether they believed in him or not. They all had their own spiritual growth. And that's what's important. It doesn't matter who we get our teachings from. It's how it is in our heart. And so it's really about being our own inner guru. So that was a big lesson for a lot of people, because when we put people on a pedestal, we're really judging them. We are judging them and us. We're judging them as being better than us, higher than us, more this or that, and us less. And that's all judgment. I think it's really important that there are 4 things that we really get a grasp of, especially in these times that we're in right now. One would be discernment. The first one is discernment. It's important that we learn to discern other people. I think we have an inner feeling when we're around someone who's a true teacher and when we're around someone who may just be manipulating us. So it's important to develop discernment, especially now when there's so much going on in the world. We have to know what to believe, what to trust, and what not to believe. So it's really important. We don't want to bypass our skepticism, because really skepticism can be a gift. We need to be aware and really feel what something means. If it's meaningful to us, that's great. It may be meaningful to someone else, someone else. But if it's not for us, then let it go. The second thing would be acceptance, to accept people where they are and for who they are. We know that we're all spiritual beings, and we also know that we're all human, and we all have our little fall, we fall down sometimes. It's important to allow people to be who they are and for us to find joy in being with them. I know for myself and most of us, we just like to be around people who are like-minded. That's why we come to places like this, right? It's in our comfort zone. But when you think about it, we're not growing as much as if we were with people who were different, because that's when we have to learn how to accept someone that's totally different, that maybe has a totally different belief system. Are we able to really hear them and be okay with them being different? Or do we kind of bristle, at least inside? And it's like, well, how can you believe that when I believe this? Just allowing everyone to be who they are, where they are. The third one would be forgiveness. It's important that we forgive people for not being who we expected them to be, and forgive ourselves for ever expecting someone to be someone that they aren't. Forgiveness, really, it's for us. It frees us. So just letting go of all of our expectations about other people. And the fourth one is gratitude. Of course, we always have to be grateful for everything, but being grateful for all of the teachers, the gurus, everyone we've ever followed, whether we now believe them to be false prophets, whether we think they were great teachers. At the time that we were with them, if we grew, if we expanded, then they were right for us. If we grew away from them or saw through some of their manipulation, that's okay too, because we grew in that way. So why do we put people on a pedestal? It could be that we have our own lack of self-confidence. We have a low self-esteem. And so we look at other people and we think that they are better than us, that they have more of a connection with divinity than we do. Lots of reasons like that. And we're denying our oneness because we are all one. So when we're in duality, instead of accepting, that everyone is different, but we're all children of God, we don't have to put anyone above us. So I think it's time to step into our own power, to embrace our own divinity, and to become the superheroes that we were meant to be. Maybe it's time for pedestals to come falling down. There's a lot of statues being taken down everywhere, and I don't agree with all of that. I really have no attachment whether statues are of people to admire or people to remind us of who we are moving beyond. So pedestals don't need to be anymore, because they really are showing us not necessarily the highest qualities of people. But I want to close by reading a poem. I know a lot of you are familiar with the poem, and I think it really exemplifies what's more important to see in each other. The poem is called The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. How many know of this one? Oh, in that case, I'm not preaching to the choir, am I? So I'm going to read this and just hear it as you would like to see other people. She says, "It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love or for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals, or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty every day. If you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours or mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. Doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will still stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else fails. And lastly, I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. So that's what I think is worthy of having on a pedestal. Namaste.